You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 15th of August, 2025, on Monocle Radio.
Donald Trump prepares to welcome Vladimir Putin to Alaska. Will Ukraine welcome the consequences? Monocle Magazine's mobility special trundles to the newsstands, and have podcasts become the preeminent means of announcing new albums? And which globe-straddling superstar will be first to ask the Daily? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. A variety of Monocle's in-house team will discuss the day's big stories. We'll preview today's summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin with the Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko. We'll leaf through the new edition of Monocle Magazine, and we'll have our weekly assessment of what we have all learned since last Friday. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. We may be a matter of hours from understanding Ukraine's immediate prospects. Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump are meeting later today at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, an American military facility outside Anchorage. Somewhat discouragingly, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived wearing a sweatshirt bearing the Cyrillic initials, which once designated the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which Ukraine left, it hoped for good, in 1991. Well, I'm joined now from Odessa by the Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko. Alexei, first of all, how nervous are Ukrainians watching perhaps the fate of their country being decided in Alaska with no involvement from Ukrainians?
Hi, we are very nervous, but also we have hopes. We want this war to end as soon as possible, and probably we're now at the closest place to peace in all these 3.5 years. So we are both nervous and hopeful.
I mean, when you say you're hopeful, though, and you're talking about peace, and obviously every Ukrainian wants this war to end, but what's the most optimistic you can bring yourself to be about how it could end? Like, what kind of solution could be suggested by this summit?
I think now they can first agree for unconditional ceasefire, which was proposition of President Trump, and Ukraine supported it in March. But because Russia did not support it, it has not happened. So now it can happen. Secondly, it's about after this, during this ceasefire, the conditions can be defined and fixed. Probably we're moving to the freezing of the conflict. I don't think that it's realistically that Russia will leave all occupied territories. So we need to speak about freezing of the conflict when Russia will continue to control at least part of Ukrainian territories. But at the same time, we should not allow to recognize this to be, so Ukraine will never recognize it to be Russian. It will be legally occupied. Also, we heard a lot from President Trump about some swapping of territories. I don't know what exactly did he mean, but what is important is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because it's the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. So, and it can't operate under Russian system. So, for the benefit of everybody, even Russian, it should be given back to Ukraine under control of Ukraine and in Ukrainian power grid system. So, but we can speak a lot more, but I think these probably are the main things.
On that question of territory, though, and that idea of Russia continuing to occupy some of Ukraine, would that be a compromise that President Zelensky would be able to sell to Ukrainians? He has said several times, many times, in fact, that he will not make any permanent territorial concessions. He's also pointed out, indeed, that Ukraine's constitution prevents him from doing that. But would he be able to sell what I guess is a realistic scenario to Ukrainians, saying we can't get it all back right now, but maybe we can work towards figuring out how to get it all back one day?
I mean, it's just statement of reality. And if he will say we are freezing of the conflict, that's something we are moving to. Yes, Zelensky said many times that he will never allow this. I don't know what for he was doing this, but today it's the only possible option. There is no other option. There is no option on the table that Russians will leave all Ukrainian territories. I think we should be realistic that Russians are not going to leave any Ukrainian territory, what they already occupied. Maybe with the help of Trump, we can, for example, solve the problem of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that I told you. But probably it's the best we can hope on. So, and here in Ukraine, I think most of the people recognize this, that this is reality. We can't kick off Russians from our territories. And even more, each day Russians are not seriously but advancing. Yes, small inch by inch, meter by meter, but they are advancing, unfortunately. So that is a realistic thing.
Hey, when you talk about the conflict being frozen, though, even if there was a more or less permanent ceasefire, if the situation returned to what it was in perhaps, 2014, 15, 16, would that allow Ukraine the space it needs to rebuild, to attract the investment it needs and to start thinking about its future, perhaps moving towards the European Union and NATO? Because that's still going to be quite a dead weight on Ukraine's ankles, if you like, the idea that Russia still occupies a chunk of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. NATO membership would be the best, and that best guarantee. Unfortunately, doesn't look to be possible today. But European Union membership is absolutely possible, and that's something which Ukraine should insist on. Quick and speedy move to European Union and to take this responsibility and promise from European leaders. Also, we definitely will need, as a part of guarantees, promises and from our allies to continue to support Ukrainian army, because in absence of NATO, Ukrainian army will be the best guarantee for us that Russia will not attack again. And definitely with such being a member of EU, having strong army, that will be, I think, enough guarantee for business to invest and to develop. And in this case, especially also there is an important issue of Russian frozen assets. If they will be seized in Ukrainian favor to rebuild the country, that will make Ukraine very attractive place to come, to work, to develop. So that is a positive scenario.
But just finally, listeners may recall that we spoke in Odessa a few weeks ago when I was there for the Black Sea Security Forum, and I remember asking you, if some sort of resolution was not reached, how much longer Ukrainians could continue to fight and continue to sacrifice. And you replied something to the effect of, what choice do we have? Do Ukrainians still feel like that? Do you think that if some sort of agreement is not reached at this meeting or at subsequent meetings, that Ukrainians still have the will and the resources to continue fighting?
Yes, we do. Because nothing has changed during these 2 months. We don't have any other options.
Alexei Goncharenko in Odessa, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. A new issue of Monocle magazine, the September Mobility Special, has arrived on the table here with a satisfying whump. Actually, that was less satisfying than I anticipated it was going to be, but, it's the thought that counts. More importantly, is on a newsstand near you now, and joining me now to leaf through it is Monocle's Editor-in-Chief, Andrew Tuck. I thought it would make more of a noise than that.
It's hype, man. That's what you need.
That's what you need. There is the satisfying whump. On the cover of it, Andrew, there is a chap toting what can only be described as a shopping bag on wheels. And these are apparently, I learned from reading the pertinent article, a huge whoop in Spain.
Well, who would have thought? So Rolsa is the company that's kind of taken the market, and for many years, they make these like little on-wheel shopping trolleys. The kind of things that in most other European cities you for good or bad, you associate with grannies and
old people getting in the way.
Old people getting in the way. Getting in the way. Certainly, my parents' generation, they definitely had one. The company was founded back in 1966, but 63% of Spaniards now say they own a Rolsa. So, how did this happen? So and
why didn't we all buy shares in Rolsa about 30 years ago?
Well, also they have just been manufacturing in Spain, but now they have a plant in Asia. They're looking for global expansion. They're eyeing up other European markets. And what was the fun thing we did? We went to the streets of Madrid and we just stopped people with their Rolsa. So these people are in the expo section. So, and again, I do love a granny, so I'm not being ageist here, but it turns out that lots of hipsters own a Rolsa. And
apparently so. People
are transporting their flowers in them, their shopping, but also they're using them for work. You know, you're an artist, you're shifting things around the city in your lovely Rolsa. And they come in a variety of looks, but there's quite a kind of modern, lean look. There are some tartan ones of hark back to the past, but they're a good thing.
Have you been inspired? Are you now personally Rolsa'd up?
Andrew, the things you ask. I haven't been Rolsa'd up for at least 10 years. Now, what I would say, though, is that it's funny how these things take off for a reason. So one of the things that's happened is, you know, in our city centres, we have made it very difficult to have a car. Mm-hmm. The way that we live our lives a little bit more chaotic or different. We're not, there's not the 9 to 5 where at 5 o'clock you rush to the supermarket. Maybe some days young people living in the centre of the city will grab something on the way home. They're not doing the shop that used to require driving to a supermarket with your sedan. So oddly, having this mobility tool is perfect because you let's go and get some wine from the neighborhood bottle shop. That's all you need. You don't need to come back with arms straining with plastic bags slicing your hand. Of course, we wouldn't have plastic bags anymore. Totes slicing your hands. This is a reflection of the changes happening in our cities, how demographics have changed, how the questions of mobility have changed. And the other reason is, of course, in this issue is this is a mobility issue. We're looking at the notion of mobility. And I think in the past when we've looked at these issues, of course, we have trains and planes and all those things. But actually, mobility is about walking. So it's about a good pair of shoes. And it's also about having a nice shopping trolley. Would you have one parked up in your hall?
Probably not, because I tend not to buy in one go enough stuff to fill an entire trolley, I don't think.
But you could move around like lots of books about warfare or something. You could have them, you could say, oh, I know, I'm going to nip to the office with all my strategic affairs books today to show Anita and team.
I could wheel them from one side of my vast sprawling estate to the other, because at the moment I have a golf buggy I use for that. We should make clear that the magazine is not exclusively an encomium to Spanish shopping trolleys. There is mobility in all its forms. You mentioned trains, and I was definitely struck by a feature on one train in particular. The idea that East German or Eastern European communist era transport would be something for which people have grown nostalgic is extraordinary, but the piece does make a fairly convincing case.
Yeah, also, harking back to the 60s, a train that the East Germans unveiled. It's called the VT 18.16 or 1816, not the catchiest of names. But this train was a representation of them of luxury travel, proving that they could do everything the West was doing. And it travelled this corridor between East and West, and it was described as a diplomat on wheels because it sold the skills of East German engineers and hinted that perhaps behind the Iron Curtain there was a life of luxury going on that we should be a bit jealous of. I don't know if that worked, but anyway, they've found one of these trains and they've restored it to all its beautiful glory. I've got a feeling you might like this, Andrew Muller.
I was actually looking at it and thinking I absolutely would have a go on that. You may be hearing more from me about that once it's up and running. It does look absolutely glorious, but I can remember travelling on what was the dying gasp of old school Eastern European rail in that first winter after the fall of the Berlin Wall. On the one hand, it was great because they had not deregulated the fares system. So a first-class sleeper between Prague and Budapest cost literally $5. On the downside, I think sometimes I can still taste the coffee I was served on the Romanian train between Budapest and Bucharest. So I hope they've at least updated the catering.
Well, if we're going quickly down memory Strasse, for me, I did drive from West Germany to Berlin for one New Year's Eve through East Germany, where you could stop at the motorway services and buy this very kind of like cheap kind of sect, which we did, which was very nice. And then I very much remember being in West Berlin and taking the subway, which used to go through some stations in East Berlin where it didn't stop, but you would see the stations as you whizzed past and returned back into the West. Huh. Look at us. Oh, I remember the Boer War as well. Very annoying, that Boer War. Never seemed to stop.
On a related note, I did want to move along from what we might think of as mobility to mobilisation. We do have a feature on how modern militaries are calling people to the colours. And, I mean, what trends are perceptible from that? Because there is a serious aspect to this. Obviously, Europe countries in particular are understanding that they are going to have to get more serious about defending themselves, and that's going to involve encouraging more people to join up.
Well, I think it's interesting. We've looked at the campaigns used by various militaries around the world to get people to sign up. Let's be clear, in some of these countries, that they don't need much of a campaign. They just knock on your door and put you in the army. But for example, in Russia, they're appealing to, especially men, say, "Come on, do you want to be a real man?" And the kind of campaign is, "You're a man, act like it." And so that it's kind of like chesty men with like big biceps. Whereas in the UK they had a campaign that got really lambasted a couple of years ago, which we've looked back at, which is calling on so-called millennials and snowflakes, saying actually you have skills that the army needs. So a slightly different kind of approach. But on the whole, we're also seeing in the US a return to the notion that, come on, this is the manly thing to do. Get in the army.
The US Army has resurrected its famous campaign slogan, "Be all you can be."
Be all you can be. And it's an intriguing time because, every country is cautious about what's happening in the world. They want more people who are skilled to sign up to join the army. You come from a big military family?
Not a big military family, but yes, there is that in my ancestry. In fact, my quite immediate ancestry, though I was never much tempted myself.
Never?
No, not really. There's a lot of early starts in that racket.
Yeah, and I
don't, as our schedulers know, I don't really do mornings.
I think I could have been in camp entertainment or the catering corps. I'm not so bad with a potato peeler, but apart from that, I can't see me kind of like threatening anyone in any way that would make them even slightly perturbed about what they're about to do.
Every little bit helps, Andrew, when the balloon goes up. Thank you very much for joining us. All of that and much more besides in the new issue of Monocle. That's the September 2025 mobility special on a newsstand very near you now. Andrew Tuck, thank you for joining us. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio, and now to Helsinki, where each August an old power plant site transforms into one of the most talked about music festivals in the Nordics. Flow Festival began 21 years ago as a niche jazz and electronica gathering, but today it draws well over 90,000 visitors and has become a cherished summer ritual for Helsinkians. We dispatched our Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff to find out how Flow Festival has maintained its cool factor for 2 decades in an industry where trends come and go, and what role music festivals such as Flow can play in fostering a stronger sense of community in our cities.
A sunny August weekend saw Helsinki's Suvilahti district former industrial site on the city's coast, transform into one of the Finnish capital's most cherished annual events, the Flow Festival. One of the few inner-city music festivals of this scale in Europe, Flow once again drew more than 90,000 visitors for a carefully curated blend of music, art, food, and wine.
I have a good time, Finland. First time here, thank you guys so much.
I met the festival's founder and artistic director Tuomas Kallio to find out how a small jazz and electronic music gathering in an abandoned railway depot 21 years ago grew into an internationally respected cultural fixture while keeping its trend-setting, arts-minded spirit.
In a way, we still are on the same mission because the idea at that time, we kind of did not quite feel that any of the existing festivals were like really truly for us. So we had to kind of create our own instead. I still think that there is the same mission in a way in place, so that we would still, at least to some extent, consider it that we are doing this festival for ourselves and the like-minded people. So that's maybe the difference. We are not looking at certain target group or base this on analysis that, okay, this market is lacking this or this. So yeah, that's the same, but of course it was a small indoor event for basically coming from our own musical projects, more or less, inviting our friends to play and DJ, and that was that. But now it's of course different, and more professional. That was like more or less like a hobby then.
Part of Flow's appeal lies in its visual language. Over the years, the festival has collaborated with some of Finland's top graphic designers to create a strong brand identity. The now ubiquitous Flow tote bags have become a kind of shorthand for Helsinki's style-savvy crowd.
A lot of the music festivals don't really care about the branding or the brand image or the visual image that much. But of course it depends. For some it's really important. Maybe especially on the electronic music scene, it's kind of part of the culture is the visual brand. For us, yeah, we are kind of design oriented. Also, the production here, and it has been important from the start. But of course, we've had different kind of approaches, different kind of identities over the years.
Performing at Flow for the first time this year was Keval Shah, a London-born classical pianist now based in Helsinki.
I don't know of another festival that is quite as exceptional as this when it comes to managing to balance a diverse range of music whilst maintaining a really clear artistic vision of musical curiosity and fun. You know, every single stage has got something different going on, and yet I think every stage manages to foster exactly that same feeling of kind of like intimacy. Even on the main stage, you feel like the people on that stage are singing for you. There is so much connection, such close connection between the artist and the audience here. And you really, as an artist, I really felt yesterday, like the energy from the audience in the room, it felt so familial in a way. Like this, it suddenly feels like Helsinki as a city becomes one big family because of the music. And that, you know, that's entirely down to the musical curation and the way the festival is set up. I think the range of music here, it's like a playground.
For Helsinki residents, Flow marks the end of summer holidays, the weekend when people return from their lakeside cottages, reunite with friends and reconnect with the city. Few festivals are as deeply woven into their home city's rhythm and identity as Flow is into Helsinki's.
I don't think there are many festivals which have such a cool inner city vibe, right? Like this festival takes place not in a big field far away from the town where you have to travel an hour and camp overnight. It happens in the center of our city, in this extraordinary urban landscape. And so when I arrive here, I feel like I'm just at home. And you know, it's so great walking around the city sort of at this weekend. You see everyone with their wristbands. I was at a cafe this morning getting a coffee, and the barista was like, "Oh, great show last night." I'm like, "Oh, this is so cool." Like, this is like, you know, I feel like we're all living in the same space here. And Also the food selection, like the quality of the food here is exceptional. I love the kind of artistic perspective they offer, like on visual art, the fact that they have these talks. I don't know, it's just this is a festival born of real artistic vision and curiosity, and it shows. And the festival's got bigger and bigger and bigger, but it still maintains such an amazing sense of wonder about what art can be and how it can directly communicate with its community. Like, it's such a community feel here, despite there being like 90,000 people here.
That sense of community is reinforced on Sundays when Flow opens its gates to families. Kids get in free, but instead of bouncy castles and candy floss, they get DJ workshops, live music, fairy tale discos, and dance lessons. Here's Sanna Mander, one of the organizers of the children's disco.
We don't want to think about kids as kids, like a different kind of people group. We just want to have parties for everybody, and the more the merrier. And we really we have all been kids, and we all want to dance and have fun. And it's truly magical for a child to dance to a really good song together with your mom or dad.
Flow's ability to stay relevant after more than 2 decades lies in its careful balancing act, expanding its scale without diluting its personality. That means keeping a sharp curatorial eye on the music, investing in design and production values, and building a program that genuinely reflects the tastes and interests of its audience, but also surprises them. Flow is also a reminder of how urban festivals can enrich the life of a city. For Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsov.
Thank you, Petri. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. Now, there will be in October a new Taylor Swift album, and you very likely know this even if you have made no effort to know this. Such is the cultural heft she commands. However, this time you know this via slightly less convoluted means than usual. While previous Swift albums have been cunningly, if not laboriously, trailed via hints and riddles, this time she just sort of announced it on the podcast New Heights, hosted by her +1 Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce and his brother, former Philadelphia Eagles centre Jason Kelce. Well, I'm joined now by Henry King, researcher at Monocle, and by Monocle's Taylor Swift desk chief, Monica Lillis. Monica, first of all, on our Taylor Desk Swift, Taylor Swift desk. Not easy words to say together, it turns out, it transpires. How excited are you about the new album?
I'm really, really excited. Obviously,
more or less the answer I expected.
I think whatever she was going to release, I would have been excited for. But her last album was very introspective, very lyrical, very poetic. It was called The Tortured Poets Department, which was released last April. So kind of a year and a half on. And this new album, The Life of a Showgirl, is going to be a little bit of a different aesthetic / era, as she calls it. It's going to be this fun pop, it's going to be fun, it's going to be pop, it's going to be something you want to move around to and dance. It's kind of got this, Fernando, excuse me for saying this sexy vibe. So I think she's going to impress with this one. It feels like she's really put her heart and soul into it this time.
We will have a bit of her actually announcing it shortly, but before we get to that, do you feel like this is going to be sort of a carryover from that vast tour she has just done, that she kind of got into the whole high-octane showbiz shtick?
Absolutely. And obviously, I, of course, watched the podcast with Travis, Jason and Taylor. And she kind of, when she talked about it, she said that they made it whilst she was on the tour, if she could fit anything else into her ridiculously busy schedule. And she's working with producers Max Martin and Shellback, who are known for their pop #1 hits all around, they're from Sweden, and that kind of says it all, doesn't it, really? But big US hits and UK hits. And they said it was just like catching lightning in a bottle. So that kind of says it all. Okay,
well, here is some of her teeing it up.
This is my brand new album.
We got TS12, baby.
This is my brand new album. It's called The Life of a Showgirl.
The Kelsey brothers there reacting with characteristic restraint. Henry, what do you make of the milieu here as a means of announcing a new album? I mean, obviously, this is a fairly cosy setup for her. Not that there's anything wrong with that, etc. But what did you make of that?
It is a fairly cosy setup. It's not exactly like they've got any hard questions from Andrew Muller to fight off against. But it's really quite new. It's quite special. It's said that 1.3 million people live streamed this event. It was enough to crash YouTube, actually. They went off air at one point and everyone was going, what on earth has happened? That completely breaks the records. Before, it was Donald Trump speaking with Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. The Joe Rogan Experience is the most followed podcast in the world. But this now has, this New Heights podcast, it's mainly about football. With the let me get there, the wrong shape of football, the wonky shape, not the popular soccer form around the world.
It's an acceptable shape of football. It's fine. I like American football. It's fine.
This is why I thought you'd be far more excited about this. It's literally a football podcast. Come on, what more could you want?
But that right there, Monica, I mean, I am not, much though I enjoyed the conspiracy theories which swirled around Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift to the extent that this was all some ghastly psyops to get Kamala Harris elected. Let's see how well that went. It is an extraordinary, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Agglomeration of phenomena there. That's a graceful phrase. That Taylor Swift has done huge business for the NFL. Do you think she's actually done more for the NFL than the NFL has done for Taylor Swift? Has there been a concomitant flow over of sort of like enormous redneck football fans who are now suddenly massively into Taylor Swift?
I wonder it's possibly the other way around. I think from what I've heard kind of on the podcast, listening to it the other day, and reports that I've seen in the media, I feel a lot more young girls, which is Taylor Swift's key demographic, and not my age range, are going over to watch the NFL more. So you see a lot more young girls in the crowds, and it's nice. It's kind of brought together, I suppose, in like a very wholesome way, dads and their daughters, I guess. Yeah, definitely. And it shows, like Henry repeated the figures, 1.3 million streaming all around the world on Wednesday evening. And I checked earlier, and its total views is up to 15 million. So that's a lot of eyes.
It is slightly more than the Friday Daily tends to get.
No, never.
It is, but Henry, is this possibly some intimation of the future here? Because obviously, when anyone or anything is as monstrously successful as Taylor Swift has been in recent years, everybody else thinks, "How can I get a piece of that?" Are we going to see lots more big-ticket pop stars now trying to think, which sports podcast could I go on?
This is the thing. I think people criticise Taylor Swift a lot, but it's clear that her current position, it sets her up as the 21st century artist in terms of popularity, album sales. I mean, they come at Taylor for releasing different versions of vinyl, but they sell out all the different merchandise, the tours. The album's released so quickly, but she's selling out completely as so. The only other podcast which I think could work maybe is Call Her Daddy. I mean, Chapel Roan recently appeared on it. Could we start to see podcasts like that? I think a football podcast is strange for an album release. I will say that. I'm not sure if that will be the particular medium of album releases.
I also will say, though, on this vein, like, I think Taylor Swift is actually late to the party on this one. I think most people, like most artists...
That sounds vaguely like heresy, Monica.
But I think she is. I think, you know, it's kind of what we expect from celebrities now if they're releasing something, or, you know, an artist releasing a new album, or someone, you know, promoting their film. We kind of expect to see them on a podcast or doing interviews, whereas Taylor Swift very much keeps herself private. She's popular enough. She doesn't need to promote herself in this way. I think she kind of just did it because she's, as Henry said, you know, she's in touch with her fans, but also it's kind of iconic, you know. They're like the most they're kind of like the Victoria and David Beckham of our era. So
can we kind of keep it classy and at least say the DiMaggio and Monroe?
I'm not that old together. Sorry, Andrew. But yeah, you see what I mean. I think, you know, why not? Why not go global with this one?
Just finally on this, Henry, we came in by gauging Taylor Swift desk chief Monica Lillis's excitement vis-a-vis the new Taylor Swift album. Are you as excited to hear the actual record at the heart of all this ballyhoo?
She might not speak to me on Monday after I say
Taylor
this.
Swift or Monica?
I'm not a Swiftie at all.
Dear.
I don't quite get it. However, I think, particularly for dads and daughters, like Monica said earlier, it is fantastic. It creates that bond. And also, my friends who do go to the concerts, of which they've paid quite a lot to go see the concerts, and often multiple times, causing minor earthquakes in places like Edinburgh. I'm not sure the Geological Survey will be that impressed by that. But they absolutely love it. So I think if you're into it, you're into it. If you're not, you're not.
Nicely handled, I think, Henry. Henry King and Monica Lillis, thank you both for joining us. You're listening to The Daily with me, Andrew Muller. And finally on today's show, our weekly reflection on how much smarter we are now than we were 7 days ago. We learned this week that this will put you to sleep. No, not Monocle Radio's widely beloved Friday news review, What We Learned, very amusing, but this, i.e. a conch shell being blown into. All right, put it down. Knew this would happen. We learned from boffins at the Eternal Heart Care Centre and Research Institute in Jaipur that the conch, for God's sake, may secrete a cure for sleep apnea. Not the sound of the conch as such, but the breathing techniques necessary to get a sound out of it. So we learned that while these are exciting times for sufferers of sleep apnea, they may be less so for their neighbours. But sticking with the subject of neighbours being vexed by unsolicited din, and once again, do you see how seamlessly these things are stitched together?
I think it's,
We learned of a thaw across the Korean border. Well, possibly. Sure, but maybe don't get too carried away. We learned that there would be, for the moment at least, no more of this. That being the loudspeaker broadcasts with which South Korea taunts its northern neighbour with reminders of the bountiful blessings of capitalism, including K-pop. Which you would reckon would actually be sufficient to inculcate renewed passion for the revolutionary thought of Comrade Kim Jong-un and or nosebleeds. However, we learned that South Korea had reportedly decided to allow North Korean sentries to take their earplugs out. And we also learned that North Korea had accordingly reciprocated, meaning that South Koreans would be subjected to less of this. From which we apparently learned that the North Korean army is whiling away the long evenings in the DMZ by establishing a didgeridoo orchestra. But we learned that maybe not. For we learned that North Korea, in the person of Kim Yo-jong, sister of cake-appreciating Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, was not having it.
Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, has rejected Seoul's conciliatory measures and reaffirmed Pyongyang's intent to maintain its hostile stance.
We learned further that North Korea has, quote, no will to further cross-border outreach, and that reports that North Korea had unplugged its speakers were, quote, an unfounded unilateral supposition and a red herring, i.e. both the worst kind of supposition and the worst kind of herring. But we also learn from scanning the North Korean papers, as we so very often do, that it's not all bad and that the new coastal resort of Myeongsasimni is becoming, quote, famous for daily growing people's laughter under the loving care of the motherly party. Big hello to all our listeners in Myeongsasimni.
Hello!
But sticking with the subject of compromises ultimately unlikely to please anybody, We learned how incredibly irritating it is when important news events are scheduled for Fridays, when we have to have this thing written and recorded by Thursday afternoon latest. For we learned that such satirical amusement as we might wish to wring from this week's Molotov-Ribbentrop tribute act in Anchorage would have to be wrung from the preliminaries, which, happily, did not disappoint.
You know, I'm going to see Putin. I'm going to Russia on Friday.
We learned that US President Donald Trump appeared not to have learned that Russia had in fact sold Alaska to the United States back in 1867 for the miserable sum of $7.2 million, still only about $156 million in today's money. Or perhaps that Trump had already resolved to sell it back for $157 million and claim a profit. A big hello to all our listeners in what may be, as of this broadcast, Alaska Oblast.
Hello!
We learned that in the meantime, Trump's administration intended to deploy a peacekeeping force to Washington, D.C.
Let me be crystal clear. Crime in D.C. is ending and ending today.
Which was arguably bold chat from Attorney General Pam Bondi, given that a 34 times convicted criminal was standing right behind her. But we learned that nobody was more determined to come down hard on scofflaws beleaguering the nation's capital than the felon in question, or indeed in chief.
If you so much as touch or even think about destroying a statue or a monument in Washington, D.C., you go to jail for 10 years with no probation, no anything.
From which we learned that his thinking on the unforgivableness of any wanton destruction and desecration of DC's public spaces has evolved somewhat since about 10 minutes ago.
On the evening of his inauguration, President Donald Trump not wasting any time getting down to business. He has just returned to the White House and is signing a series of executive actions in the Oval Office, where he is pardoning some 1,500 January 6 rioters.
But we learned that there was at least one criminal that this administration, specifically its Department of Justice and State Department, was not prepared to indulge. We learned this also from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who every day has to reckon with the fact that she was second choice after Matt Gaetz, who was once found by congressional ethics investigators to have paid a 17-year-old for sex, which must be quite the rolling existential crisis. Can I get some general muttered agreement? And we learn from Bondi's solemn utterances of a potential source of the kind of seed capital we need to make these weekly monologues even better, like with our own orchestra or whatever.
Today, the Department of Justice and State Department are announcing a historic $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro.
He's in the Miraflores Palace on Urdaneta Avenue in Caracas, near the junction with Avenida Sucre. Seriously, you can't miss it. It's the pink building with mauve pillars and a big Venezuelan flag out the front. You can send us the check care of the office. Address is on the website. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller. And that's all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Monica Lillis, Andrew Tuck and Henry King. Today's show was produced by Hassan Anderson and researched by Henry King. Our sound engineer was Steph Chungu. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening.